In the freezing winter of 1941, the once vibrant streets of Leningrad fell silent under a blanket of snow and dread. The city that had pulsed with the energy of factories, symphonies, and bustling markets, now echoed only with the distant rumble of artillery and the hollow footsteps of desperate citizens. What began as a military encirclement by Nazi forces quickly transformed into something far more insidious, a total collapse of resources that turned everyday urban existence into a harrowing struggle for survival. No bombs or bullets alone could break the spirit of this metropolis. It was the slow, methodical starvation of supplies that exposed the fragile skeleton beneath its grand architecture. The air carried the faint scent of smoke from makeshift stoves, while shadows lengthened in unlit apartments where families huddled together, whispering prayers for bread that never arrived. This was urban life during resource shortage, a testament to how quickly the rhythms of civilization can fracture when the flow of food, fuel, and hope is severed. Yet in those early days of the siege, few could fathom the depths of deprivation awaiting them, as the proud city on the Neva clung to memories of abundance now slipping away like melting ice. Before the guns of September 1941 roared to life, Leningrad thrived as the cultural heart of the Soviet Union, a city of wide boulevards lined with neoclassical buildings, trams clanging through crowds of workers and intellectuals alike. Factories hummed with production, theaters hosted ballets under crystal chandeliers, and markets overflowed with bread, potatoes, and imported goods that sustained a population exceeding 3 million. Daily life unfolded in predictable patterns, morning queues for fresh milk, afternoons filled with the chatter of schoolchildren and factory shifts, evenings spent in communal apartments, sharing stories of the revolution's triumphs. The scent of baking rye bread wafted from state bakeries, while the golden spires of the Admiralty gleamed under summer sun. Citizens moved through this urban tapestry with a sense of permanence, unaware that the intricate web of supply chains, rail lines from the east, barges on Lake Ladoga, and warehouses stocked for winter, formed the invisible lifeline keeping the metropolis alive. Children played in parks, lovers strolled along the embankments, and engineers planned ambitious projects, all grounded in the assumption that resources would flow endlessly from the vast Soviet hinterland. But beneath this surface of normalcy, geopolitical tremors were already stirring, as alliances shifted and borders tensed, setting the stage for a rupture that would redefine what it meant to inhabit a city under siege. The warning signs emerged quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the months leading up to the invasion. Ration cards appeared for staple goods as tensions with Germany escalated, and newspapers spoke in vague terms of heightened preparedness without alarming the populace. Factories began converting to war production, diverting steel and coal away from civilian needs, while rumors circulated of troop movements near the western frontiers. In the apartments and communal kitchens, families noticed subtle changes. Butter became scarcer, meat portions shrank, and fuel for heating was rationed amid growing uncertainty. Yet daily routines persisted with determined optimism. Workers clocked in, students attended lectures, and the radio broadcast stirring marches to rally the collective spirit. No one fully grasped how these early restrictions signaled a deeper vulnerability in the urban ecosystem, where reliance on centralized distribution made the city hostage to external disruptions. The silence before the storm was deceptive, filled with the ordinary sounds of life, clattering dishes, children's laughter, the hum of trolleybuses, masking the gathering pressures that would soon overwhelm the system's capacity to sustain its inhabitants. By the time the German army group north advanced in earnest, the invisible cracks had already begun to widen, though the true scale of the coming famine remained hidden behind official assurances and human denial. As summer faded into autumn, rising tension gripped Leningrad like an iron vice. The Nazi encirclement closed in, severing road and rail connections, isolating the city from the rest of the Soviet Union. Warehouses emptied faster than anticipated, and the first severe cuts to bread rations sparked anxious whispers in bread lines that stretched for blocks under gray skies. Factories operated under blackout conditions, their smokestacks silent as raw materials dwindled, while the Neva River, once an artery of commerce, became a corridor of peril under Luftwaffe patrols. Families hoarded what little they could, potato peels, scraps of leather for soup, while officials scrambled to organize evacuations that prioritized children and the elderly. though many refused to leave their homes, clinging to the belief that relief would come soon. The air thickened with the acrid smell of burning documents and improvised stoves fueled by furniture, as the rhythm of urban life shifted from productivity to preservation. Each passing day brought new pressures, diminishing electricity that plunged neighborhoods into darkness, frozen pipes halting water flow, and the psychological strain of constant aerial threats. Decisions made in distant command centers to hold the city at all costs imposed unbearable weights on civilians, transforming neighbors into competitors for dwindling calories and eroding the social fabric that had once bound the metropolis together. Key mistakes compounded the crisis as leadership prioritized military defense over comprehensive civilian provisioning. Evacuation efforts were incomplete, leaving hundreds of thousands trapped as winter descended with merciless ferocity. Supply flights and precarious ice roads across Lake Ladoga offered meager lifelines, but mismanagement and enemy fire limited their effectiveness, turning every delivery into a gamble against death. In the halls of power and on the streets alike, the pressure mounted. Workers collapsed at machines from exhaustion and hunger, intellectuals debated survival ethics in unheated rooms, and party cadres enforced discipline amid growing despair. The decision to maintain industrial output for the war effort, even as bellies emptied, reflected a calculated ruthlessness that sacrificed the immediate needs of the population for long-term strategic aims. Sounds of artillery became the new soundtrack of the city, interspersed with the coughs of the malnourished and the eerie quiet of abandoned districts. Resource allocation grew increasingly arbitrary, fostering resentment and quiet acts of defiance, as the urban machine, once a marvel of planned efficiency, began to seize under the weight of unsustainable demands. These choices, born of ideological conviction and wartime necessity, accelerated the slide into systemic failure, where the promise of socialist abundance collided brutally with the realities of isolation and scarcity. The moment the system began to fail arrived not with a dramatic explosion, but through the quiet extinguishing of lights and the halting of vital services in the depths of that first brutal winter. Bread rations plummeted to a few hundred grams per day, often adulterated with sawdust and cellulose, while fuel shortages forced entire apartment blocks into freezing darkness. Pipes burst from the cold, streets filled with uncollected refuse and snowdrifts, and the once reliable public transport ground to a standstill. Hospitals overflowed with victims of dystrophy, their bodies wasting away as doctors rationed dwindling medicines. Families dismantled wooden interiors for firewood, the crackle of burning parquet floors a grim ritual echoing through stairwells. By now the collapse was irreversible. Supply lines strained beyond capacity could no longer sustain the population, and the intricate networks of distribution that defined modern urban life unraveled thread by thread. Citizens ventured out in search of anything edible. Cats, dogs, birds stripped from the parks, while silence replaced the former bustle, broken only by the occasional wail of sirens or the thud of distant shells. This was the tipping point where resource shortage ceased to be a temporary hardship and became an all-encompassing reality, reshaping every aspect of existence in the besieged city. Human consequences unfolded with devastating intimacy across Leningrad's neighborhoods, as social breakdown eroded the bonds of community and family. Starvation claimed tens of thousands, bodies wrapped in rags left in snowbanks until spring thaws allowed mass burials. Reports, whispered in hushed tones, spoke of desperate acts, cannibalism in isolated corners, though official narratives suppressed such horrors to preserve morale. Children with swollen bellies and hollow eyes scavenged for scraps, their innocence shattered by the daily calculus of survival. Women queued for hours in sub-zero temperatures, only to return empty-handed, their strength fading as frostbite claimed fingers and toes. Men, weakened by labor on fortifications, succumbed in the factories they once powered. Fear and suspicion replaced camaraderie, theft of rations became commonplace, and trust fractured under the weight of hunger's relentless grip. The urban landscape transformed into a tableau of decay, skeletal figures shuffling past grand facades now pockmarked by shrapnel. The proud Hermitage Museum stripped and shuttered, its treasures hidden while its halls sheltered the dying. Sensory overload gave way to numbness, the metallic taste of ersatz coffee, the pervasive odor of unwashed bodies and decay, the profound silence of a city holding its breath against oblivion. Yet amid the breakdown, flickers of resilience emerged. Secret diaries chronicling the ordeal, clandestine concerts in candlelit rooms, acts of quiet solidarity that underscored humanity's stubborn refusal to fully surrender. The long-term historical impact of this urban ordeal rippled far beyond the lifting of the siege in 1944, altering the trajectory of Soviet society and the global understanding of total war. Leningrad's survival, purchased at the cost of nearly 1 million civilian lives, became a potent symbol of endurance, immortalized in literature, monuments, and state propaganda that celebrated heroic sacrifice while veiling the full extent of administrative failures. The experience exposed the vulnerabilities of concentrated urban populations dependent on fragile supply chains, influencing post-war urban planning and civil defense strategies across the Eastern Bloc. Rebuilding efforts transformed the city, with new housing blocks rising from rubble, yet scars remained in the collective memory. Generational trauma passed through stories of famine winters, shaping attitudes toward authority, self-reliance, and the limits of ideological promises. Economically, the siege accelerated industrialization drives in safer regions, redistributing populations and resources in ways that redefined Soviet geography. On the world stage, it highlighted the human dimension of resource warfare, where depriving cities of sustenance proved as lethal as any battlefield campaign, informing future conflicts and humanitarian responses. The collapse of urban life in Leningrad served as a stark case study in how modern civilizations, for all their technological sophistication, remain perilously close to primal struggles when essentials are withheld. Even as the siege ended and supplies tripled back, the ghosts of resource scarcity lingered in Leningrad's rebuilt avenues, a haunting reminder of civilization's precarious balance. The city rose again, its streets repaved and factories restarted, but the memory of empty shelves and frozen corpses infused every reconstruction with an undercurrent of unease. Survivors carried the weight of lost loved ones and moral compromises, their stories weaving into the broader narrative of 20th century ruptures. What happened in those 872 days of isolation revealed the thin veneer separating ordered urban existence from chaotic survival, where a single disruption in resources could unravel decades of progress. The Neva still flows past ornate bridges, but its waters seem to whisper of winters when hope itself froze solid. In the end, the collapse did not destroy Leningrad utterly. Instead, it exposed the enduring fragility of human systems, urging reflection on how easily abundance can yield to absence when warning signs are ignored. Today, as cities worldwide grapple with their own dependencies on global networks, the echoes of that distant siege serve as a solemn caution. The comforts of urban life are never guaranteed, and the next shortage may arrive not with fanfare, but in the quiet erosion of routines we take for granted. The story endures not as mere history, but as a mirror to our own vulnerabilities, where the line between thriving and merely enduring grows thinner with every unheeded pressure.